Her name was Rebecca Ann Courtney, and I had a crush on her since the 7th grade. But even though I could tell myself I would kill to be with her, I knew deep down that it would never happen. The simple truth is that Becky couldn't stand me. She tolerated me because of mutual friends, but I never understood why she didn't like me. At first, I thought that maybe she didn't know me very well, so naturally I tried to correct it. Every time I saw her, I would go up and say hi, but even though she would acknowledge me, she would turn away or just walk away. During 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grades, I must have asked her out 50 times, but she never even bothered to give me any attention. In 12th grade, she started dating Frank Devon, so I couldn't ask her out anymore. I wasn't expecting to see Becky after graduation, so I was surprised to see her on her first day of college, because I heard she was going to some college out east. By then, I had already gotten over my feelings for Becky, so I didn't even bother saying hi to her when I saw her. Fate or some gods must have loved to mock me, because Becky was always there. It turned out that we both chose to major in business management, and as a result, we had a lot of classes in common. Did I continue to lust after Rebecca Ann? Of course, yes, but I learned from our past mistakes, so I tried my best to ignore her. It was not easy, and sometimes it was terribly difficult. It seemed that every fourth college the class had group projects, and the instructors usually assigned groups alphabetically. Since Courtney and Connors were close alphabetically, we often ended up in the same group. Luckily for me, when the group was deciding who would do what for the project, I didn't have to work with Becky. I'm not sure I could handle it. One thing I noticed was that when groups would get together to work on projects, Becky always seemed to look at me when I looked at her. I had no idea what that meant. I got through my first year without making a fool of myself and was looking forward to the summer break. Did I mention that fate and the gods love to mock me? Our family owns a business, and I've worked there part-time since I was 13. Summer is our busiest period, and Dad always hired extra help for the season. It was a week after school ended, and I had just arrived at work. Dad called me into his office, and when I got there, I found Rebecca Ann Courtney there. As soon as I walked in the door, he said, "Good news and bad news, Harry." The bad: Charlie had a family emergency and had to fly home to Maine. He expects to be gone for a month or two. Good: instead of working for Charlie this summer, you will be a temporary shipping and receiving manager. Shouldn't be a problem. You've worked there full-time for 2 of the last 3 years and part-time since you were 14. He nodded towards Becky and said, "I need to introduce you to Rebecca. I hired her to take your place while you play the role of manager." "I already know Miss Courtney." He raised an eyebrow at this. Not because I knew Becky, but because I called her Miss Courtney instead of Rebecca or Becky. He didn't say anything about it then, but I knew he'd want to know what it was before the end of the day. All he said was, "Take Rebecca and show her the place. Make sure she knows where everything is, and then get to work." I spent 20 minutes showing Becky around the production facilities. I showed her where both women's rooms were, where the lounge and snack machines were. I introduced her to Marla and Ashley from purchasing, Janice from accounting, and Alice from quality control. I took her to the receiving and shipping department and introduced her to Tom and Jerry, who also worked in that department. I explained what we were doing and what she would be doing. When I finished, I asked, "Do you have any questions?" She had one, and it amazed me. "Why don't you love me?" This question caught me off guard, and it took me a few seconds to compose myself and answer. I remembered something one of my English teachers once told me. When something is not clear, ask questions. "Why do you think that I don't love you? You know me, and you know that I prefer to be called Becky, so what is all this nonsense with Miss Courtney? And when we are in general classes, you are cold and distant towards me." I chose the path of a coward. "This is a personal matter, Miss Courtney, and has no place at work. Maybe someday, when we're not at work, we can discuss this issue. But for now, we need to work on the order for Hamilton. We need to be ready when Ups gets here around 1 o'clock. Her look told me that she was definitely going to find out. Luckily, there was a lot of work to do, and I handed it over to Jerry to show her how it all worked. As Jerry let her in, I wondered what the hell just happened. A girl has been ignoring me for the better part of 6 years and suddenly wants to know why I don't love her. It didn't make any sense to me. She's tried her best to push me away all these years, and now she wants to know why I'm ignoring her. I threw these thoughts aside and got to work. Right after lunch, I had to stop by the purchasing department to talk to Ashley about when we could expect to receive the packaging material we needed. She said it should be delivered the next day, and then asked how I managed to get my girlfriend a job. She's not my girlfriend, and I didn't even know she worked here until I came here this morning. She's not your girlfriend. Hell no, Ash. She doesn't even love me. Nonsense, Harry. If she's not your girlfriend, she wants to be. Come on. I knew it just from the way she looked at you, Harry. She wants to be your girlfriend. I laughed it off and went back to the receiving and shipping department. The next 2 days passed with minimal interaction between me and Becky. There is a diner not far from the business, and on the third day, while I was having lunch there, Becky came in, saw me, and came over to my table and sat down across from me. We're not at work right now, Harold, and we're not on the clock. So tell me what's the matter with this Miss Courtney crap, and why don't you love me? Let me give this back to you. Why do you expect me to love you, considering the way you've acted towards me since 7th grade? Why do you expect me to love you after you have responded rudely to my invitations to go out more than once? You mentioned coldness and aloofness the other day. Remember, Miss Courtney, didn't you behave coldly and distantly towards me all your school years? Why, after you treated me like this from day one, did you expect me to be warm and friendly? I don't hate you, Miss Courtney, but because of past experiences, I am indifferent to you. I could tell from her face that she was not used to being talked to like that, and she didn't like it. But she asked, and I answered. She looked at me with a look that I couldn't decipher, and she got up and left without saying a word. The rest of the week passed, and although we were often close, we rarely spoke to each other. I did most of the talking, telling her what needed to be done or explaining how to do it. On Saturday afternoon, I went to the country club, where our family had memberships to swim in the pool. Becky's family were also members, and I had seen her there several times over the years, and as luck would have it, she happened to be there that day. She was with 2 of her friends that I knew from high school, and I have to admit that the sight of 3 girls in swimsuits made an impression on me. At one point, I saw them looking at me while Becky was saying something to them, and they were smiling and nodding in agreement, and naturally, I wondered what they were talking about. I would never have known if I hadn't asked, which I definitely didn't intend to do. The club cafeteria had a great half-pound beef burger, so I stopped and ordered it. I was sitting at the table waiting to order when Sarah Wilcox and Carol Perry came in, saw me, and approached me. They didn't ask, "Can I sit down?" They just pulled out chairs and sat down. These were the same girls I saw when Becky was talking to them by the pool. Sarah began. "What's new, Harry? How are you doing?" "Long time no see," Carol added. I immediately realized that something was wrong here. I had known both of them since 3rd grade, and although we were always friendly with each other, they never just came up to me and said hi. Add to that the fact that they were talking to Becky while they were looking at me and smiling, and it all said, "Danger, Harry Connors, danger." I replied, "I was busy with classes, and now that it's summer, Dad makes me work full-time. Are you and Polina still together?" "Haven't heard from her since she went east to study." "Busy this evening?" asked Sarah. "Nothing is planned." "Why?" "There's a party I want to go to, but I need a companion. If I go alone, I will be pestered all night." Again, I heard the warning, "Danger, Harry, danger." I've never met Sarah. I invited her several times, but was always refused, and now she invites me. Yes, Harry, this is some kind of setup. I had no plans and curiosity got the better of me, so I said, "I think I'd like it." Sarah smiled at Carol and said, "Whoever missed it is late." "What does it mean?" I asked. "Carol was going to invite you, but I beat her to it. That's when I realized with absolute certainty that this was a setup. It wasn't common knowledge, but I knew Carol played for another team, and there was no way she would invite a guy. We agreed on a time for me to pick Sarah up, and the girls got up and left just as my burger arrived. As I sat and ate my lunch, I tried to understand what was going on, but I couldn't think of anything. I picked Sarah up at 7, and she said the party was at Marlene Cantrell's. Marlene was another girl I knew from school, and we dated a few times, but it didn't work out. We remained friends, but not close, and I did not see her for almost a year. Marlene answered the door when we rang the bell, and although she smiled and said, "It's good to see you, Harry," I noticed that she was rather surprised to see me with Sarah. She greeted us and led us through the house to the terrace. She pointed to the bowls of alcoholic and non-alcoholic punch. She showed me where the keg of beer was and went to answer the doorbell. We were not the first guests, and we took drinks. The terrace was large, and all the outdoor furniture was moved out onto the grass so that the terrace could be used as a dance floor. Several couples were already dancing to music from a portable CD player. Sarah and I placed our drinks on one of the tables and joined in, then spent the next 30 minutes dancing and mingling with other guests. We were dancing when I saw Becky leave the house with Marlene. Becky saw us, said something to Marlene, and walked straight towards me and Sarah. She tapped Sarah on the shoulder and asked, "Can I dance?" "Of course," Sarah answered and walked away. Becky took her place, smiled, and said, "Hello, Harry." I think I surprised her when I asked, "Why?" She frowned and said, "Why what? Why did you ask Sarah to bring me here?" The frown disappeared and her face became serious. I didn't think we were so transparent. I needed to find a place where we could talk calmly, without any pressure, and I really doubted that if I asked you directly, you would agree. I thought that if I randomly met you in an informal setting, it would work. You've definitely piqued my curiosity, so let's sit down and you can tell me. Let me grab something to drink first. We left the dance floor, and she led me to the alcoholic punch bowl, filled a red Solo glass, and then went and sat on a couple of chairs on the grass. As soon as we sat down, she said, "After our conversation last week about why you don't love me, I started thinking about our past. I never thought about how you perceive my behavior. The point is, you scared me." "I? Did it scare you? Why in God's name did you think that?" "Just the way you looked at me, your constant presence there when I looked back. What I saw, I perceived as the behavior of a stalker." "I? Pursuer?" "Let me finish. I don't think you ever knew my sister Abby. She is 6 years older than me and graduated from high school before we started high school. She went to State University to study as an information technology specialist. There was a guy who kept asking her out on dates, but she didn't love him and constantly refused him. He was doing the same thing I thought you were doing. He constantly looked at her and was always there. In other words, he was stalking her. One night at a party, he wanted to approach her without her consent, but some people heard her protest and saved her from him. Later, when she told her parents what had happened, she described what led up to the attack. That was on my mind when you showed up. If you would let me, I would show you that I am not like that. I couldn't. When you first asked me out, I had a huge crush on Danny Freeman and was trying to get his attention. If I had gone with someone else, he would have seen it and stayed away. So the first few times I turned you down, it wasn't because I didn't like you. By the time I got over Danny, I already knew what happened to Abby, and I saw in your behavior exactly what she described as the behavior of her attacker. Looking back, it was unfair to you, but in my defense, I was a young and inexperienced girl. When I started dating Frank, you stopped doing all the things I perceived as stalking, and I realized I was wrong about you. I thought about approaching you and apologizing for my behavior, but by that time you were already dating Polina, and I decided to leave it in the past. I was going to go to study in the East and did not expect to see you again, but plans changed, and I stayed here to study. So here we are. Well, I'm glad to know that you don't think I'm some kind of crazy anymore, and in light of your confession, I may change my attitude and start calling you Becky instead of Miss Courtney. If you'll allow it, I need to find my date and make sure she's having a good time." I stood up and walked away, leaving her with a shocked expression on her face. I don't know what she expected after telling her story, but I doubt indifference was on the list. I found Sarah talking with Randy Combs and Rick Moore and approached them. Sarah looked at me with a "what are you doing here" look, and Randy and Rick looked at me with a "get lost" look, but I ignored them and offered Sarah my hand, saying, "Our dance was interrupted. Let's finish it." Obviously, she didn't want to spend time with me. She did her job and got me to Becky, so her job was done, right? I was supposed to be Becky's problem, right? But I was her date, and she couldn't tell me to fuck off without making a scene, and she didn't dare do that at Marlene's party, or she'd end up on her blacklist, so she smiled at me and said, "Let's go." "Who was supposed to take you home tonight?" I asked while we danced. I could see she was about to lie, but then her face changed and she said, "Randy." "Well, I don't want to ruin your evening, so when we finish this dance, I'll leave." "Why do you want to leave? The plan was for you to stay with Becky." 6 years of coldness, aloofness, and neglect should disappear after a 10-minute conversation. Maybe we'll get along better at work, and maybe after school starts, but that's all that happened. The music stopped, and I thanked her for the dance and began to lead her back to Randy, who was talking to Rick and Chuck Burns. "What are you doing?" "I'm taking you back to Randy and leaving." She grabbed my hand and stopped me, saying, "Oh no, you're not leaving. The rule is, you dance with the one who brought you, and you leave with the one who brought you. You're stuck with me until you take me home." Is this coming from a girl who has already arranged for Randy to take her home? Rules always have exceptions. She pulled me back to the dance floor, and as I held her in my arms and we danced, she asked, "Why have we never met, Harry?" "Only you can answer that, Sarah. I invited you many times, but you always refused." I probably had a good reason then, although I can't remember it now. I need to think about it and try to remember. My problem right now is that I think I'd like to make amends, but I know Becky is trying really hard to win you over, and she's my friend. I don't want to lose her by interfering with her wishes. I just can't understand why she wants me, as you put it. From the 7th grade until graduation, she made it clear to me that she was not interested in me. I just don't see it suddenly changing 180 degrees. All I know is that she pushed me to bring you here and said that if everything went the way she wanted, she would leave with you. And her interest in me piqued your curiosity, and now you're interested. Guilty on all counts. I laughed and said, "Don't worry, dear, good old Harry loves the attention." While we were dancing, I saw Becky looking at us and couldn't understand what she was thinking. After a while, I saw that she came out on the dance floor with Bill Croft, but still every time I glanced in her direction, she looked at me. As midnight approached, the party started to wind down, so I took Sarah's hand and went to find Marlene to say goodbye. When we got in the car, I asked Sarah if she wanted to stop somewhere for coffee or something to eat, and she said yes, so I drove to the Village on 6th Street. Over coffee and pie, I asked her if our evening together would harm her relationship with Randy, and she said no. "We meet sometimes, but there is nothing between us. We just insure each other when we need a companion for some event." How will this affect your relationship with Becky? It shouldn't. I don't see why it should. You were my companion, and she can't be angry with me because you didn't follow her program. That's today, but what about you going out with me after tonight? Am I going to do this? I don't know, but I'm asking. Do you want to go to the VFW dance with me on Friday? She was silent for a few seconds, considering the consequences of her yes, and then answered in the affirmative. On Sunday after church, I did chores around the house and in the yard, running errands for my mother. About 4 o'clock, I was pulling weeds out of the flower beds in the yard when my mother shouted to me that I had a call. It was Sarah. "I have to cancel our date on Friday. Just talk to Becky. She wasn't too upset that last night didn't go according to plan, but she did freak out when I told her about Friday. I don't want to lose one of my best friends over something that probably won't go anywhere. I understand, dear. Maybe another time. When I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but think about Becky and her actions. Why, after years of neglect, does she now insist? I could accept her explanations about her past behavior that she gave at Marlene's party, but why the aggressive behavior now? It didn't make any sense to me. Throughout the rest of the day, thoughts about Becky and her current behavior would come into my head, swirl around for a bit, go away, and then come back again. She was a girl who was used to guys being attracted to her, and I wasn't one of them, so she had to recruit me to be her fan. Did she see me as a challenge? Did she suddenly realize how charming and irresistible I am? Yes, of course, as if. Monday morning, I was sitting at my desk in the shipping department when Becky walked in. I looked at her and smiled, saying, "Good morning, Becky. How was the weekend?" Since it was 180 degrees from how things had been before, it surprised her, but she quickly recovered. They were normal. Not the way I wanted, but normal. There was a lot of work that day, and although Becky and I were always close, our conversations concerned only business matters. Tuesday and Wednesday went pretty much the same way. That all changed an hour after lunchtime on Thursday. It was a slow day. I was sitting at my desk going through documents and Becky was sitting at the side table entering data into the computer when suddenly she turned to me and asked, "Are you doing anything tomorrow evening?" This caught me off guard, and I looked at her with what must have been a devilish expression on my face and replied, "Excuse me, what are you doing tomorrow evening?" "I don't know." "Why?" "I want to go to the VFW dance, and I need a date. Since it looks like you're never going to ask me out, I'm asking you." This didn't surprise me. I was stunned. I didn't know why. I probably shouldn't have thought about how she'd been acting the past week or so, but it still stunned me. I sat and looked at her with my mouth open, trying to comprehend what was happening. It's not such a difficult question, Harry. Have two one-word answers to choose from, yes or no. Finally, I shook the fog from my head. I don't think that would be a good idea, considering our working relationship and everything. "Oh, Harry, in a little over a month, we will leave here and go back to school. I'm a summer assistant, Harry. So what about Harry? Yes or no?" I already mentioned that I've always liked Becky, right? I admit that by the time I got to college, I had already accepted that she was unattainable, but here she took the first step. While I sat and looked at her, a small war was going on in my mind. On one side, a voice said, "It's too good to be true, Harry, so it probably isn't." Another voice said, "Do it, Harry, it's what you've always wanted." The first voice replied, "This will end badly, Harry." The second voice said, "She's a lovely young lady, Harry, and she obviously wants to get to know you better. Come on, Harry, what have you got to lose?" Some other guy might have been able to look back on those years of angst and say, "Hell no, I couldn't do it." Yes. What, Harry? "Yes, I would like to invite you to the VFW dance on Friday." When I picked up Becky on Friday, I was reminded of why I've been obsessed with her since 7th grade. She looked absolutely gorgeous in her little black dress and heels. I got a great shot of her sexy legs as I helped her into the truck as I moved to my side and got into the car. As soon as Becky pulled away from the curb, she said, still trying to understand why, "It's crossed my mind a couple of times. It's actually quite simple. I want to know what I missed by being such a bitch to you at school." The truth is, you didn't miss that much. At that moment, I was so in awe of you that I couldn't think straight when you were around. I would probably do something so incredibly stupid that you would laugh at me and humiliate me. It would hurt more than indifference. Were you excited about me? Past tense. Does this mean that I lost a step or two over the years? The fact that you managed to get us both into that truck should answer that question. I had a great time at the dance. There were a few people we knew there, including Sarah and Randy, and we pushed a couple of tables together. Becky and I seemed to fit together and danced well together on the dance floor. One day, during a slow number, she came close and put her head on my shoulder, and I cursed the gods for not allowing this to happen sooner. I danced a few times with Sarah and a couple of other girls I knew. During the waltz, Sarah said, "Looks like I missed my chance." I laughed at this. "You had a lot of chances, girl, but every time I asked you out, you turned me down." "Yes, because every time you asked me, I was dating someone else. You should have kept asking, and sooner or later, you would have caught me when I wasn't with someone." Crap, if only I knew. It's not too late. If things don't work out with Becky, you can always call me. Yes, and they will tell me, "Sorry, but I'm dating someone now." If so, I'd rather let him go than miss my chance with you. I thought, what the hell is wrong with these girls all of a sudden? Suddenly, I became the flavor of the month. I know what you're thinking, Harry. You couldn't. Do you want to bet? You wonder why girls suddenly ask you out or make it clear that they are interested in you. Am I right? Yes. A couple of reasons, Harry. The first is that the girls are talking and Polly gave you very high marks. So now that she's gone, the others want to see what it was that she thought was so great. The second is simple human nature. Someone else wants it naturally, so do you. The song ended and Sarah pulled me towards our table before I could say anything to it. Her words came back to me half an hour later when I was dancing with Nancy Wilder. "Do you see anyone now that Paulina is no longer here? I've dated a few, but I'm not dating anyone in particular. I know what it is. Ever since Rory went full-time at Florida State, I've been stumped too. I'm not stupid, and I knew that I had just been given an invitation to call her. I began to wonder if Sarah was right about the money. I went to the bathroom, and on my way back to the table, Rita Dutchman stopped me. "How are you, Harry? I haven't seen you for a long time. I mostly work and go to school." "Same for me. Rumor has it that you haven't dated anyone since you left Polly. You have my number? Call me. I have to go." And she hurried to the women's restroom. My eyes followed her to the door, and I thought about what Sarah had said. Gail was my first, and for a while I thought I was doing well, until she told me that Eddie Catron asked her out and she was going on a date with him. I was young and a little stupid. I dated 3 or 4 others without success until I met Helen Geneva. We dated until she gave me the same shit that Gail did. Paulina was next, but by the time I met her, I realized that sex didn't mean you were together forever. I knew Pauline and I wouldn't last long because I knew she was going back east to go to college and didn't plan on coming home except for summer break, Thanksgiving and Christmas break. Then something happened that made me wonder if I was really stupid. I had just returned to my seat after walking Nancy to her seat. I sat down, took my drink iced tea I was driving, took a sip, and as I put the glass on the table, Becky said, "Will I have to fight to get out of here with you tonight?" Having no idea what she was talking about, I just looked at her with a, "What the hell are you talking about?" on my face. "It's obvious to me that almost every girl you danced with here tonight wants you. I half expected Karin to pull you off the floor and carry you out the door. Bev looks at you like a cat about to pounce on a mouse and wants to kidnap the mouse, and even that backstabbing bitch Sarah is giving off, 'I want to take him home' vibes, so I have to fight for the rest of the evening." I swear to God, I have no idea where that came from, and I still can't believe I said it. But when she asked that question, I just looked at her and said, "Anything worth having is worth fighting for." A strange expression appeared on her face, and then she said, "That's it, boy, we're getting out of here." She grabbed her purse and stood up. This caught me off guard, so I was a little slow to react. But I stood up, and she took my hand in a way that seemed possessive and led me towards the exit. As soon as we got into the car, she kissed me. I'm not easily accessible. I'm a girl who goes after what she wants, and that's you. Find us a bed. I might have been a little dazed by the sudden change in the evening, but dazed or not, there was no force on God's green earth that could stop me from doing what the girl I'd had a crush on since the 7th grade said. It took me only 9 minutes to get to the Bide, a wee motel on Colfax, and 4 minutes to check into my room. As soon as we entered the room, Becky looked me in the eyes and said, undressing, "Time for the truth, boy. I know you're dying to understand my sudden change in attitude, so I'll tell it like it is. You have what I want. At least I hope there is. I've already described the situation at school, but what I didn't say is that I've been watching you since your initial orientation. Because of the way you acted in school, I thought that sooner or later you would make a move towards me, so I waited patiently. I waited, but you ignored me. Once I realized that you weren't going to make a move, I decided that I would have to make it myself. I had a problem. I'd never had to pursue a guy, so I wasn't sure how to do it without seeming easy. What I was doing wasn't working, so I decided to be a little bolder, and that led us to dancing at the VFW today. At the dance, I saw how the other girls were looking at you, and I realized that if I wanted to get what I wanted, I would have to take the bull by the horns and go for it. By then, she was completely naked except for her stockings and heels. It took my breath away. The fact is that I was so stunned by what was happening that I just stood there and watched her undress and talk. There she was, gorgeous and naked, while I stood there like a fool, fully clothed and drooling. She shook her head in what may have been a sign of disgust. I must have lost my skills. Usually by the time I unclasp my bra, the guy is already naked and waiting impatiently. Apparently, I'll have to undress you myself. She walked up to me and reached for the buttons on my shirt. The sight of her approaching me must have acted as a trigger in my head that snapped me out of my stunned stupor. I grabbed her wrist as her hands went to the buttons on my shirt. Why? Why what, Harry? All this. This hotel room. You didn't have to do that. After today's date, I would ask you out again, and I know you know it. So why this over-the-top step? I said it's time for the truth, Harry, and the simple truth is that unless Paulin was lying, you have what I want, and after what I saw on the dance floor tonight, it's obvious, at least for me, the other girls want it too, and I decided it was best to pin you down before someone else does. So over the edge, and here we are. I don't understand the connection with Polina. What could she say to make you interested in me? At one of our pajama parties, Polina told us about your sex skills. So I'm a plaything for the night, and tomorrow you'll ignore me again. Be serious, Harry. If Polina didn't lie, do you think I'll let you leave? It may not be your choice. You may be bad in bed. I have my standards, you know. Her face took on an angry expression. Bad in bed? I'll show you something, you bastard. And she showed. We made love. Not bad. I think you'll fit. I was about to answer her something sarcastic, but I stopped and thought about her words. I think you'll fit. Does this mean she's going to stick with me? If that's what she meant, then I better shut up. I woke up first, sat up in bed, leaned on the headboard and looked at her, wondering what would happen next when she woke up. She rubbed her eyes, looked at me and said, "It's not all bad." What? The look on your face. Whatever you're thinking, it can't be that bad. How do you know what I'm thinking? It's written all over your face. I'll make it easier for you. No, you don't have to worry about taking me home right away. Knowing my mom as I do, she's probably not home yet. She probably just woke up in a hotel room like this one. I raised an eyebrow, and she noticed and said, "Later." Next item on the agenda. No, we don't need to look for wedding rings today. Next. No, we won't tell our moms to start thinking about wedding plans. This is all. It didn't even come close. Are we going to do this before the shower, in the shower, or after the shower? I vote for all three options. She failed. We checked out, threw the key on the table, and went to Denny's for breakfast. We placed our order, and then Becky said, "I noticed how you raised an eyebrow when I mentioned Mom and where she was most likely located. My dad died 6 years ago, and my mom is a beautiful, healthy woman. She grieved for about a year and then began looking for a replacement. She says she's never met anyone who even comes close to Dad. I told her she would never meet because Dad was one of a kind and she would have to settle for second best. She's still looking, but she's a healthy woman and healthy women need a sex life. She doesn't want to set a bad example for me, so she doesn't bring them home. She still thinks I don't know what's going on. She thinks I believe her when she says she drank too much and couldn't go, so she stayed over at Lily's, Megan's, or Bev's. Now that this has been clarified, we can move on to the next point. Did you enjoy it last night? Certainly. Do you want more? Same answer. So much so that you give up all the others. I frowned when I heard this, but before I could say anything, she continued. I'm not talking about taking wedding vows. I'm just asking, can you be exclusive? I don't understand what you're getting at. No, you understand. You just haven't realized it yet. I believe in speaking straight, so here's how it goes. I went into last night, the motel part, with a thought that if Paulin wasn't lying, I'd wrap you up for myself, but if she was lying, it would only be one night. I was very glad to know that Polina not only told the truth, but also could not convey how good you really are. Back to last night. I took this step because I saw how the other girls looked at you. It was obvious, at least to me, that several of them were going to try to win you over. I don't share my toys. So the question is, can you be exclusive with me? Or will you be like a kid in a candy store, wanting to try everything? I assume, of course, based on your actions in the past, that you want me. This possibility had not occurred to me when we entered the room last evening. I thought that Becky just wanted to satisfy her curiosity and that it would really only be one night. Not going to lie, yes, I would love to be like a kid in a candy store, but those other girls Becky mentioned and a few she didn't mention haven't been etched into my memory since 7th grade. In other words, they were all attractive and in some cases even sexy, but they weren't Becky. If Becky gave me exclusivity, then there will be exclusivity. I just smiled at her and said, I can be faithful. And I was. Over the next month, the girls Becky mentioned and a few she didn't mention did try to win me over, but I wasn't interested. Why would there be? Remember when I said that Polina was my gold standard? Well, Becky was platinum standard. No, I didn't mean to ruin everything. No, Becky did it. We returned to school a little over 3 months ago, and we still had a lot of activities together. One morning, it was Wednesday, we were walking from our 10 o'clock classes in the student cafeteria, and I asked her what she wanted to do on Saturday evening. I'm going to the Tim McGraw concert. Damn, girl, could you give me a little more warning? I'm not sure I'll be able to get tickets at the last minute. Greg already bought them. Greg? Yes, I'm going with Greg. Greg was a guy who transferred from another university and was in several of our business classes. Let me clarify. Are you going on a date with Greg Mortison this Friday? That's right. By then, we had reached the dining room and Becky turned to go in, but I kept walking. I heard, "Wait, Harry," and turned to see her hurrying to catch up with me. No, thank you, I thought and ran. We both had an introduction to the business that afternoon, but luckily we had assigned seats, so I didn't have to sit next to her. Luckily, she was sitting close to the front, only 2 seats away from Greg, I noticed, and I was in the back, so I was able to get up and leave before she could get to me when the class ended. We didn't have any other activities together that day, but I couldn't avoid her after class. We were both still working part-time in the business, and other than missing work, I would be where she could come to me. The good news is that Charlie came back, and I was able to talk him into assigning us to different departments. It didn't stop Becky from getting at me, but it did slow her down and give my anger time to subside. At least a little. I managed to avoid her until 10 minutes before the end of work. What's wrong with you, Harry? Why are you acting like this? You're a college student, Miss Courtney, so you can't be that stupid. What did you expect when you told me you were going on a date with another guy? It doesn't mean anything, Harry. He had tickets to the concert and asked me if I wanted to go with him. You know how much I love Tim McGraw. Then, Miss Courtney, you should have asked me to get tickets for the concert when you found out it was going to be held here. But you didn't do that, did you? Remember our first evening together? The evening when you started talking about fidelity. An evening when you insisted on exclusivity. I didn't realize that this only applied to me. My mistake. Shame on me for being so naive. In a way, it's good that I've now learned that our relationship is so weak that it can't handle dating a guy who has concert tickets. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to celebrate leaving work and then go find a date for Friday. I left her and went home where I told my mom what happened and that if Becky called, I didn't want to talk to her. I walked out onto the patio, sat down at my desk, and started drafting the paper I was due next week. Mom called me over for dinner, and after eating, I decided to do what I told Becky I was going to do: find a date for Friday night. And then I smiled because I had an evil thought. If I can arrange this, who better to date than one of the girls Becky wanted to outdo the night we met? My first choice would normally have been Sarah, but even though she said I could call if things didn't work out with Becky, she was actually still Becky's best friend. Even though I was angry at Becky, I didn't want to intentionally ruin her friendship with Sarah. I decided to call Nancy Wilder first, and was a little surprised when she agreed to the date without hesitation. The question, "What about Becky?" followed only after she said yes. I just told her that Becky had decided to date other guys and expected me to be cool with it, but that wasn't going to happen. We made an appointment for Friday, and I went back to working on my essay. I managed to avoid Becky during school, but I couldn't avoid her at work. Considering that she was the one who ruined our relationship, I couldn't understand her sarcastic attitude when she saw me. It started when she walked through the door and saw me. "Mr. Macho got a date for Friday?" she asked in a sarcastic tone. I decided that if she wanted to be sarcastic, then I would be too. "None of your business, Miss Courtney." She grinned and said, "I thought so. Call me when you're tired and here." No. I walked away from her and tried to avoid her for the rest of my shift. The next day, I was sitting in the cafeteria, drinking coffee and going over my notes from last class, when Becky walked in, walked down the line, saw me, and walked toward me. I gathered my things, and when Becky sat down, I was already standing up. "Where are you going, Harry?" I ignored her and left. I had an agreement with my father that I would always have Friday and every other Saturday off, and that was my free Saturday. This meant that after school I wouldn't see Becky again until Monday. I picked Nancy up at 7 and we went to Outback Steakhouse for dinner. After dinner, we headed to the VFW for the Friday night dance. We had a good time, although a few people raised their eyebrows when they saw me not with Becky. We left around 11 and stopped at the Village Inn for cake and coffee. We had been there about 15 minutes when Becky and her companion entered. They laughed and smiled at each other until Becky saw us. I saw the sudden surprise on her face when she realized that I actually had a date, and that it was with one of the girls she was afraid I would get carried away with before she could have me. Her eyes met mine, and then I turned my attention to Nancy. Becky and her companion, I couldn't bring myself to say his name, took a table across the room and sat down. I couldn't see them because my back was to them, but apparently they could see us because Nancy said, "Becky hasn't taken her eyes off us since she sat down. Are you sure it's all over between you? Think about it, Nance. Is she with me or with another guy?" "Accepted. I just didn't want to be the one to ruin your relationship." "Calm down, dear. I didn't call you until she told me she wanted to date other guys. Can we leave here? I don't feel comfortable with her sitting there looking at us." We left the restaurant, and when we got into the car, I asked her what she wanted to do, and she surprised me by saying, "I was hoping you would want to take me to a motel." My surprise showed on my face, and Nancy said, "Let's be honest, Harry. You have no real feelings for me, other than sympathy, strong sympathy, but still just sympathy. We have no future other than a few dates. Clear?" I nodded, and she said, "I had a wonderful romance with Rory. We made love 3 or 4 times a week until he left for Florida. I haven't had sex since he left, and I can't wait to do it." "I don't understand this, Nance. You are a very beautiful girl. You should have a line of guys who want to date you. They are there, but all they want is sex, and although my body wants that, I don't want my life to become a series of one-off relationships. So what makes me different?" You're a good guy, Harry. You're not an asshole, and Polian described you as a guy who won't let you down. But according to you, I will only be disposable. No strong feelings, just sympathy, right? There are one-time connections and one-time connections. The first is, I came, I saw, I conquered. And the next day you tell Tom, Dick, and George, hey, guess what? I had sex with Nancy last night, and then there's the other one. The one where he wakes up in the morning, smiles, says thank you, and leaves, and no one hears anything about it from him. Poland described you as the second type of guy, someone with whom you don't mind having a series of one-off relationships. This is all. Am I just a nice guy? She turned away and said, and she also said that you like to do something special. When she said that, I remembered one night early in my relationship with Polian French. We dated on and off from 8th to 10th grade. At the beginning of 10, I invited her to meet regularly, and she agreed. We both turned 18 in the second month of 11th grade. She was 5 months older, and until then, all we did was kiss. One Thursday, Polian told me that I should stay home for the weekend. When I asked what she meant, she said her parents were leaving for Las Vegas on Friday and wouldn't be back until next Tuesday. Guess what we're going to do? Are you serious? She was serious, and we had a great time. It didn't start out well, and it was mostly because of me and my worldview. I gave her what she wanted, and she rocked my world that weekend and for many to come. I had to write to her and thank her for teaching me this because it led me to Becky, and now it will lead me to Nancy. I smiled at Nancy and said, I guess I can be your plaything for the night. Nancy enjoyed it as much as Polian and Becky. However, I had to take Nancy home, so we didn't have a night full of love with waking up next to each other in the morning. When I took her home, we agreed to meet the next day. We spent that date at the Super 8 Hotel on Barclay, and the next Sunday date was in her bedroom since her parents were out for the day. When I got home on Sunday evening, I looked back at the weekend and decided that I liked how it went. Not only sex, but also sex without commitment. Nancy and I could just be sex partners as long as she was willing, and there would be no hard feelings when she decided to end it, because I knew from the beginning that it would just be a friendship with benefits. We agreed that as long as we were disposable, we would have no other partners for either of us. I managed to avoid Becky at school on Monday, but I knew I couldn't avoid her at work. To my surprise, she was friendly towards me and did not try to start a conversation. I know it sounds stupid, but I was both happy and upset. I'm glad because I didn't want any drama. But he's upset that she didn't try to restore the relationship. I mean, what the hell? She was the one who ruined everything, so shouldn't she at least try to ask for forgiveness? She was friendly to me again on Tuesday, and it wasn't until Wednesday that she spoke about the situation. I was getting a Coke from the machine in the break room when Becky walked in. I took my Coca-Cola and went to the table with it. Becky grabbed a bottle of water and came and sat across from me. I heard you and Nancy Wilda spend a lot of time together. Besides the weekend, I spent time with Nancy on Monday and Tuesday, so I just nodded. Was I so easily replaced? As I recall, you freed me from our so-called commitment relationship, so that freed me up to meet others. Nancy just said yes first when I started calling. She seems to like me and is a fun date, so yeah, I keep asking her out. Damn it, Harry. Why can't you understand that my going to the concert with Greg didn't mean anything? Not for you, maybe, but it meant a lot to me. It meant I couldn't trust you. That's just stupidity, Harry. No, that's not true, Beck. You can't believe it. Of course I can, Beck. I don't know how it all happened, but I can imagine a likely scenario. You heard about McGraw's concert and mentioned it to someone, saying how much you liked his music. Greg heard this and saw a chance to get you in bed, so he went and bought tickets. He let you know that he had tickets and hinted that he needed to find a girl for the second ticket. You couldn't buy a ticket because they sold out 9 hours after they went on sale, so your only chance was Greg. Oh, for God's sake, Harry, it was just a date. Stop it, Beck. This was not just a date. Greg knew you were my girlfriend. Everyone knew it. We walked into class every day holding hands. Greg knew this and tried anyway. You're not stupid, Becky. You knew what he was up to and you agreed. I don't care what Harry thinks. I'll go to Tim McGraw's concert. Did you sleep with Greg? I'll never know, but you saying it didn't happen means nothing to me because I know what you're capable of to get what you want. I looked at my watch and said, I need to get back to work, and I stood up and left her standing there. After this conversation, Becky started avoiding me, and I was glad the drama was over. Nancy and I lasted another 2 months before she stopped it. She met someone who she thought could be a long-term partner. I wished her luck and life went on. My schedule was busy with lots of essays and research projects, so I stayed away from dating for a while. Becky and I were both studying to be business managers, so we still had the same classes, and although we were friendly to each other, we didn't talk. Usually these were nods upon meeting. When I finally got back into dating, I would sometimes see her with guys. It was never the same thing, and I never saw her with Greg. She couldn't say the same about me. The girl I was with was the same every time I bumped into Becky. Yes, another one of those girls Becky was trying to get past when we met. However, this time was a little different. Marge wasn't one of the girls who just wanted to know what I was like in bed. Marge was actually a little wary when I first asked her out. It was at a VFW dance and I came alone. I wasn't looking, I just wanted to dance a little and have fun. I had been there for about an hour when I saw Marge come in and take a table. For 10 minutes or so, she constantly looked at her watch, then at the door, and after a couple of minutes again at her watch. I approached her and asked, would you like someone to talk to you and dance with you until the one you are waiting for comes? Marge smiled and said, that would be nice. I sat down and asked, will he mind? Not him. Anna was supposed to meet me here. What happened to Mike? Chelsea Marks happened. I decided not to go deeper and asked her to dance. Anna never showed up, so we sat and talked, danced, and talked some more. At the end of the evening, I asked Marge out on a date. I don't know, Harry. I just got rid of a jerk. And you don't want to date someone else. Does this mean I'm an asshole? I don't know, Harry. Are you an idiot? You dated Becky and she dumped you. Then you dated Nancy and she dumped you too. So what's wrong with you, Harry? I'm not a fool and I know why they both went after you. They made no secret of the fact that they wanted to know if what Napoleon said was true, and apparently it was true, because they stayed with you for a while. But then they abandoned you, Harry. The question I have to ask myself is why. I looked at her for a few seconds before saying, I could tell you, Marge, but you probably wouldn't believe me because I'm an asshole, right? If you want to know, ask Becky and Nancy. Thanks for the dancing, Marge. See you. And I got up and left. The next day was my work Saturday, and Dad decided I knew all I could ever know about shipping and receiving and moved me to accounting, which meant I no longer worked alongside Becky. At lunchtime, I went to the break room for a Coca-Cola and a bag of chips. I was sitting there, sipping my drink and munching on some chips, when Becky walked into the room. She came and sat down something she hadn't done for weeks and said, I got a call last night. It was weird. I continued to eat my chips and drink my Coca-Cola. Marge Collins called me and asked why I left you. Why did she do this? You'll have to ask her. I didn't leave you, Harry. You acted stupid and pushed me away. I didn't want this, Harry. So tell it to Marge. I got up from the table and went back to work. It was 2 weeks before I saw Marge again. It was at a VFW dance, only this time I was the one sitting alone at the table. I would have preferred to sit at the bar, but all the chairs were taken when I arrived. Marge came in, saw me, and walked towards me. Can I join you? Are you sure you want to be seen as a jerk? She sat down and said, this is not the mindset if our relationship is going to go anywhere. Are we going to have a relationship? That's what dating is for, to see if there is anything to build on. As far as I remember, you asked me out on a date. I didn't say no, Harry. I asked some questions, and you told me where to find the answers. So I did it. I got the answers, and now the only question is when are we going to have our first date? What about tomorrow? Dinner and a movie. I like it. Let's go dance. We spent the evening drinking, dancing, and talking. I found out she was calling Becky. I already knew that, and she was calling Nancy. Nancy told me about your agreement. Said she was sorry she let you go. Looks like her new man is no match for you. She didn't tell me what Becky said at first, and there was no way I was going to ask. Apparently, she realized that I wanted to know but wasn't going to ask, so she told me. At first, Becky was mad at me because I said I was going out with you. She hoped that after your affair with Nancy, you would return to her. Then she told me what happened and how sorry she was. I just shrugged and said, it was her choice. Let's go dance. My date with Marge went as planned, and we had a great time. I got a nice kiss when I took her home and a date for Tuesday. That date led to several more. At the end of the fifth date, when I walked her to the door, she said, "Are you going to make the first move, or should I do all the work?" I remember there was a conversation about assholes. I didn't want to be one of them. Oh, for God's sake, Harry, we've already dealt with this nonsense. Now I think it's time for us to go to bed. She opened the door and led me inside. It was a long and tiring night. Luckily, it was one of my free Saturdays, and I didn't have to get up and go to work. Marge made us breakfast, and over the bacon and eggs, she asked, "What are we going to do for the rest of the day?" "Whatever you want. Don't think. You can't do it all day and then be fine in the evening. I thought you loved me, but now I find out that I'm just your toy." "Yes, and you like it." "You're probably right." The weekend was fun. Marge and I made it through the end of the school year, and then she went to Arizona for family reasons and never came back. I never heard from her again. I worked full-time again over the summer, and of course, so did Becky. We were friendly to each other, but neither of us tried to deepen our relationship beyond good morning when arriving at work and have a nice day when leaving. So one Wednesday, I was sitting in the break room, drinking coffee and eating a donut, when Becky came in and sat down at the table with me. "Harry, I need a big favor." "What's happened?" "I need a gentleman for Friday and Saturday." "Why me?" "Because my family loves you." "I don't understand." "It's my cousin Carol's wedding. The rehearsal dinner is on Friday and the wedding is on Saturday. My family doesn't like the guy I'm dating now. I was directly told that I should not come if he was my date. I can't miss Carol's wedding, Harry. I just can't, but it seems like they don't want to see me if I'm with someone they don't like. I know that they love you because when we were together, they told me more than once not to let you go. I'm desperate, Harry. Help me, please. I had no other plans for the weekend, and it would really be more of a public appearance than a date, so why not? I told her I would do it. She laid out the logistics. We'll drive to her uncle's house in Fairmont early Friday morning so we can relax by the pool before dinner. After the wedding, we will go to the reception, which will end by 10 o'clock, and then we can either go home that night or stay the night and leave on Sunday morning. I expected Becky to use the car ride to convince me that we should get back together, but she surprised me, and all she talked about were things related to school and work. She told me that Dad was going to move her from shipping and receiving to purchasing, but I already knew that. She liked her dad, and so did her work ethic, and he asked me if I thought she would want to work full-time after graduation. I told him I thought she might agree, and he said he was going to move her around to different departments so she could learn more about the business. She didn't tell me that my uncle had a mansion. When we arrived, I was introduced to her Uncle Aaron, call me Ron, and Aunt Rabbit, call me Tubby, and Carol, who was to be the bride. Tubby told Becky that she had put us up in the West Wing bedrooms and invited us to unpack and join the group by the pool. Becky led me to the East Wing, pointed to the room that would be mine, told me to put on my swim trunks, and promised to show me the way to the pool. I unpacked, hung up what needed hanging, put on my swim trunks, and went out into the hallway where I found Becky waiting for me. She was wearing what some might call a swimsuit, but it had no more material than a man's handkerchief. She, of course, knew the effect her swimsuit would have and stood there grinning. I said, Lead. When we arrived at the pool, I realized that there were two pools. One was an Olympic-sized swimming pool for distance swimming, and the other was a kidney-shaped pool for recreational use. I also learned that Becky was not the exception, she was the rule. There were about a dozen of Carol's friends there, and all the girls were wearing swimsuits that were practically non-existent. There were a few older women there in bikinis, but they were a little more modest. One of the older women was the most striking woman I have ever seen. Nearly 6 feet tall, raven hair flowing down his ass, green eyes, and a body to kill for. She had a classic hourglass figure. Becky saw me looking at the woman, read my expression, and said, "No, you wouldn't." "No, I wouldn't. Take her to your cave and keep her busy." She took my hand and dragged me towards the woman. "Aunt Abby, this is Harry. Harry, this goddess is my Aunt Abby." Aunt Ebi looked at me and said, "If you lose him, give him my number. It looks delicious." Becky laughed and said, "Aunt Abby is a family man who eats men. Don't let her get you. She'll turn you into a worn-out husk in less than a month and then dump you on a pile of her other worn-out conquests." Aunt Abby laughed and said, "I'm not that bad," says the woman who killed 4 husbands. Aunt Abby laughed again and said, "Don't make me mad, little girl, or I'll take him away from you just out of spite." "How about it, Harry? Can she take you from me?" I stood there looking at Aunt Abby, and Becky said again, "Can she take you from me, Harry?" Another couple of seconds of silence on my part, and then, I think. They both laughed, and Becky said, "I better get you away from her." When we left, I looked at Aunt Abby again, and she winked at me. I already knew that Becky's mom was a rock fox, and it must have been a family trait. I swear there wasn't a single woman in Becky's family who scored below a 10 on a scale of 10. The only people I wasn't introduced to were the guys at the pool. I met them when I jumped into the pool. One came up to me and said, "I take it you belong to Becky?" I nodded in agreement, and he extended his hand. "Tom Halder. I'll be with Carol soon, unless I can somehow get my hands on Aunt Abby." I laughed and said, "With you on this?" I said, taking his hand. "Harry Belmont. She told Beck to behave, or she would take me away from her." All I could do was hold back the scream, "Do it, do it." He laughed, and then introduced me to the other guys in the pool. We had a nice time, and I even ran a few laps before Becky told me it was time to get dressed for dinner. Becky was gorgeous, and I have to admit I didn't look too shabby myself in my gray pinstripe suit and maroon tie. The rehearsal went off without a hitch, and at the subsequent dinner at the country club, Becky and I sat with 2 of her married cousins and their spouses. The conversation at dinner was that they were trying to find out more about me and my relationship with Becky. I didn't tell them that there was no relationship and that I was just on a date. Becky, on the other hand, was leading everyone to believe that the next big wedding might be ours. Luckily, before things got too far, the band started playing and people started dancing. I danced with Becky's mom, Aunt Tubby, and even her 70-year-old grandmother. Becky thought it was a riot. "When we get married, I will have to keep you in a chastity belt while you are around my family." I was having too much of a good time to ruin it by reminding Beck that I'd only be with her on the weekend. The highlight of the evening, at least for me, was when Aunt Abby walked up to our table, took my hand, said, "It's my turn," and then led me to the dance floor. "I just wish I could get to know you better." There was a short pause. "Or do I have a chance?" "What?" "You may be deceiving everyone here, but not me. I don't know what the game is, but Abby can't be fooled. It's obvious, at least to me, that Becky is in love with you. It's just as obvious to me that you don't like her that much, am I right?" I nodded yes. "Well, tell me." "I'm just her date for the occasion. She didn't want to come alone, so I agreed to go with her." "This is something more. It must be. She doesn't hide her feelings. They are visible to everyone." The music stopped, and the band leader said they were going to take a break. I wanted to take her back to the table, but she grabbed my hand and said, "No, follow me." and she led me out onto the terrace and to one of the stone benches that lined it. We sat down and she said, "Tell me, I want it all. Real details." I've already mentioned how impressive she was, and sitting next to her, I wanted to do what every man who saw her wanted to do, and she knew it and used it to get what she wanted. And it worked. I was under a spell. I opened up and let it all out. All this, she listened and then laughed. "Poor boy, do you think girls want you just because you're good in bed? Has it ever occurred to you that once they're with you, they might want to stay, that they've discovered that you're more than just sex? How many of them ever stayed here? They all abandoned me, so I must have had nothing special except sex. This is all complete nonsense, Harry, and you know it. You knew where you were with Nancy in advance. As for Marge, you don't know why you never heard from her. She could have been in an accident and is in a coma in some hospital for all you know. And Becky didn't leave you, you kicked her to the curb. Why couldn't you accept what she said as the truth and then move on? Let's see if this ever happens again. I can tell by my niece's behavior that she really wants to be yours. Why not try it, Harry? What do you have to lose?" We both sat in silence for a few moments and then, "Are you really that good in bed, Harry?" "Some girls think that way. So I will make a deal with you. You give my niece one more chance, and if it doesn't work, I'll let you have sex with me. This is a can't-lose situation for you, Harry. Think." She stood up and said, "The music is playing again. Let's dance." I swear every eye in this place was on the door when we walked in. Everyone wonders what Harry and the ogre Aunt Abby were doing. We danced to 3 numbers, and then I walked her back to her table and then back to mine. Luckily, Becky was on the dance floor with her groom, so I didn't have to answer her questions. At least not before. Becky stayed on the dance floor for another dance, this time with the best man. I was watching them when Becky's mom pulled me off the seat and onto the dance floor. She said the following: "What were you and my sister doing on the terrace?" I tried to be nice and said, "She wanted my body, but I fought her off." "Don't put this bullshit on me, young man. First, we both know that if Abby wanted you, she would have gotten you, and second, Abby would never poach a male family member, and third, and by no means least, Rebecca is Abby's favorite niece, not to mention she's also Rebecca's godmother, and she will die before she does anything to harm Rebecca. She just wanted to know what kind of attention I had for Becky. That's all. You were there that long just answering a question. Something in my head clicked and instantly went from enjoying dancing with a sexy woman to being annoyed by a bunch of bossy women who were attacking me. If you need to know what happened, ask his sister. The music stopped, and I led her back to the table. She grabbed my hand and tried to hold me. "I'm not done talking to you yet. This is what they call conflict, Mrs. Courtney. You want to talk, but I don't." I pulled away, left her on the dance floor, and returned to my table. Becky was there when I arrived. Her expression was one of disbelief. "You just walked away from my mother and left her standing on the dance floor." "Yes, I think it was me." "How could you do this? How could you be so rude?" "It was easy. It was enough for me to just get tired of the women in your family sticking their noses where they don't belong." "Is this what happened to Aunt Abby?" "See? And you too. Everyone should know about me and Aunt Abby. This is no one's business but Aunt Abby's and mine. Enough about this. Let's dance." "I don't think so. You just managed to ruin the mood." "Oh no, don't. Don't blame it on me. It was your irritated behavior when I sat down that brought us here. Instead of attacking my ass, you should have waited until you talked to your mother and learned from her what went down." I stood up and Becky asked where I was going. "You don't want to dance, and I don't want to just sit here and drink, so I'm going back to my room." And I left, leaving her sitting there. When I returned to Uncle Aaron's room, I considered just taking my things and heading home, but then I decided to become a responsible adult for the sake of change. I brought Becky, so I needed to take her home. Not that she couldn't handle it without any problems, but what was right was right. I was lying in bed and almost asleep when there was a knock on my door. I stood up, walked over to him, and reached for the doorknob when I heard, "Open up, Harry, it's Abby." I opened the door and Becky walked past me into the room. She turned and closed the door. "I wasn't sure you'd open it for me, but somehow I knew you'd open it for Aunt Abby." She made love to me. "You can be such an asshole sometimes, but you are my asshole and you need to get over it, Harry. You are mine and I will leave you whether you like it or not. And I have no say in this matter? No, don't. I have decided that I will be the mother of your children and your bedmate until death do us part. Fine, I admit I got stupid when Greg waved Tim McGraw tickets at me, but still, what were you thinking back then? All he got from me was a goodnight kiss on the cheek. I never dated him again, though he asked me at least a dozen times. Then I realized the fact that you will probably leave if I don't gather the strength to follow you. I remember someone once told me, if it's worth having, it's worth fighting for. So here we are, and I'm not letting you go. You can say, don't think like that, and push me away, but I will always be there. If you're on a date and I see you, I'll be your shadow, Harry. I will always be there. I have a weapon that I can use. I think your dad likes me. I will be a great daughter-in-law and give him wonderful grandchildren. I'll ask him to make sure that we always work together, that I'm always close enough to work on you. Don't resist, Harry. I always get what I want, and I want you." 3 months after graduation, we got married. Over the next 5 years, she actually gave my parents 3 beautiful grandchildren. Looking back at my life since I said, I do, I realize how happy I am that Becky decided that everything worth having is worth fighting for, and that she achieved what she wanted. I had a good relationship with Becky's family, very good with the female part. Every dance or social event I attended with them, including dances, I was with them. I already mentioned that on my scale of 1 to 10, they were all 11 or better, right? Aunt Abby was especially merciless. During one of the dances, Aunt Abby, by that time already her 6th husband, said, "I don't think I'll ever have to experience what you're like in bed, do I?" I could also press buttons, smiled at her, and said, "I don't know about that. You are Becky's favorite aunt. If you ask her, she might let you borrow me." She stopped midway, took a step back, looked at me, and then burst into loud laughter. I stood there with a grin on my face as everyone in the room watched the spectacle. I don't think anyone ever made Aunt Abby lose her temper like that in public, and I could tell by the looks on the faces of the other ladies that I was going to have to tell the story. I walked Aunt Abby back to her desk and then had to go to the men's room. When I returned to my desk, I saw Becky and Aunt Abby talking and smiling at each other. I sat down and Becky turned to me and said, "Aunt Abby and I were just talking. You know she's my favorite aunt, right? Anyway, she has a request." I looked at Abby and saw this devilish grin on her face, and I thought, oh my gosh, Harry, what have you just done? They both read my expression and laughed. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next